So, after a year of waiting, Shadow of the Erdtree is finally out. Elden Ring, what a great game. Definitely one of my favorite games of all time. Up there with Twilight Princess and Breath of the Wild / Tears of the Kingdom. It was everywhere in 2022 when it was released. Memes about people being maidenless were everywhere. Margit, it was everywhere. It's crazy that it's already been 2 years since it came out. It was my introduction to the Soulsborne genre, and it was really fun. Until it wasn't, and then it was again. The DLC though, well, you might as well throw everything you have out of the window. I played through it in Journey 3, so on top of it already being difficult, why not just make it harder on myself? Truth is, I made a new character too late. I wasn't fast enough to get to Radon and Moog, and I definitely probably wasn't going to be fast enough to beat them everywhere. So in Journey 3, every enemy is basically a mini boss. They have lots of health, and it's almost just not worth it to fight most enemies. Some of them are fine, but like most of them are just a pain to fight. I don't know, I'm just tired of dying 100 times because common enemies are unstaggerable and have lots of health, and they hit hard. So it's a little draining on that front. It's my fault. I should have had a new game character ready already, but in my defense, Journey 3, while being a bit harder than New Game Plus, was still kind of easy. I was dying quite a bit, but not to this extent. To counteract the difficulty, you have Revered Spirit Ashes and Shadowrun Blessings, and while they make you stronger, on Journey 3 it's not by much, especially when it comes to the Black Knights. They're the banished knights of the Realm of Shadow, but worse. They're just everywhere and they come in gangs of them, so good luck trying to fight 5 of them. And also, one of the overworld dragon bosses fights them and he barely does any damage to any of them. So that's all you need to know, that you need to avoid these guys as much as possible. And that's not all, because you have these enemies, which I don't even know the name of. To put it simply, you're fighting the pole blade monks from Sekiro with Elden Ring mechanics. You just know this enemy is meant to be parried, but no, dodge, 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 or get stun locked and die. I shouldn't have played this on Journey 3, it's miserable. It's basically the worst parts of the main game, that being mountaintops of the giant and consecrated snowfields, and amplifies it to a 20. Having a dodge an enemy that does spin and flip attacks while dual wielding, and not to even mention delaying their attacks like all the bosses and most enemies do, is ridiculous. There's no reason why every enemy should be delaying their attacks just so they could get a cheap hit on you. It's annoying and was easily one of the worst parts of the main game. Think you're gonna dodge a hit with frame perfect timing? No, you get hit because they delayed their attack. Elden Ring is the only Soulsborne or Souls-like game I've played where this happens. And to make it worse, as soon as you press that button to heal, most enemies and all bosses will always have an attack ready for you, and it starts as soon as you hit the button. While your character is still reaching for the flask, the boss already has their weapon in their hand, so when you heal, they hit you, and it's frame perfect, so there's nothing you can do about it. And also, you can't do anything about it because you're waiting for the animation to finish, so you can't roll out of the way either, so you get hit and you waste a flask. And this could happen back to back every time. It's just dog water mechanics that's borderline unfair, so you have to gain distance on the boss so you can actually heal without having to worry about getting hit. This is something for the whole game, not just the DLC. But in the DLC, they chase you down, making healing practically impossible and useless. Speaking of which, the only thing that seems viable against basically everything seems like it's strength builds, because using anything else, even bleed, looks like it just tickles the enemies, while strength seems like it actually does something to them. And that is a shame, because there are quite a few new cool weapons in the games, like Rilana's swords, the backhanded blades, the Fire Knight swords, and the giant katana. They seem pretty good against random enemies you come across in the game, but once you go into a dungeon, you might as well bring out the greatswords and curved greatswords before you get swarmed by 5 enemies. My personal favorite of the new weapons they added in the DLC would have to be Rilana's light greatswords. They look pretty cool, and they have a pretty cool Ash of War where you could hit enemies with ice or fire. So, going into the overworld, or free roam, it's really good. I'm currently at the ruins of Ra, but look, from what I've seen, it's pretty good. Starting the DLC and going into the Graveside Plains and looking at the withered Erdtree brings back those feelings of playing Elden Ring for the first time again. Elden Ring is back! Exploring gives you a false sense of security though, for me at least, because coming across the normal enemies, I thought, oh, this should be easy, because like in Learner and Limgrave, in New Game Plus and above, you two-shot the enemies. Yeah, I thought this area was going to be like the Limgrave of the DLC. They even have an overworld enemy that's actually really tough, just like this Tree Sentinel, but that's not the DLC's equivalent because there's the Black Knight boss. So, me thinking this was like Limgrave was quickly shattered upon coming across him, and especially the enemy encampment, because there's another one of those tall fire giants guarding the camp, and there's Black Knights everywhere. So I ran away. So exploring more around the open world, you see that it's not as vast, big, or filled to the brim with stuff like in the base game. It's more compact, and the dungeons and caves it does have are pretty different and varied from each other. The caves, most of them, don't have a boss at the end. Instead, when you clear them, you get a pretty good item most of the time. The jails, however, those could be pretty expensive. They're pretty new. They're almost like the living jar prisons, and they're pretty freaky, especially the new enemies that are in here. It's basically the what's inside the living jars. They're almost like an enemy from Bloodborne. In fact, there's a few areas and enemies in here that are really close to Bloodborne. Like this enemy right here that inflicts frenzy is basically the bug alien enemies from Bloodborne. So there's moments in here where you can really see and feel the Bloodborne influence. Too bad we'll probably never get a next gen or PC port or remaster of it though. So back to the overworld, Graveside Plains is a pretty good starting area. It gives you quite a few ways to explore and get around, and quite a bit of stuff to do with secrets to find, and it actually feels bigger than it actually is, so that's pretty good. The legacy dungeons though, from what I played so far, are pretty good, particularly Mesmer's Castle. There's just so much to explore and go to. There's secrets, alternate paths, alternate entrances, and hidden areas everywhere. So much so that you could actually miss a lot of stuff like I did, because I was running from those fire knights because they hit like tanks. And what seems to be a common theme for this DLC, they have a lot of health for no reason. So while it's cool that there's so much stuff to do here, I didn't, because you know, the fire knights being everywhere. So going to the first castle I came across, Belurat, I think that's how you pronounce it. It was fun. It wasn't Stormveil Castle, but it was still pretty good and exciting to go around finding stuff and secrets, until it wasn't. These horned warrior enemies are a pain to go through, tanky, and then they hit hard. Then you come back later when you have more Shadow Realm blessings, and you kind of just run through them. This is where you come across that one enemy though that does all the flips and stuff, like it's the pole blade enemies from Sekiro. These enemies are cheap. I already had enough to say about these types of enemies. I just don't think they fit Elden Ring's playstyle, because the main mechanic is dodging and not parrying. And even when you do dodge, it just feels like you'll end up getting hit because their attack chains are pretty long and you're bound to mess up the timing. And you would think getting their weapons would help you, since you would think you'd be able to fight like them, especially since you could dual wield, but no. This is a Soulsborne game, so obviously the weapon's gonna be way worse when you're wielding it. They do all these jumps and flips, but when you have them, you just do the normal backhanded blade moves. So the main boss of the area, the Divine Beast Dancing Lion, is really cool. It's a Chinese lion, and it even has 2 NPCs under it controlling it. What they do is a bunch of wind and lightning attacks. This one wasn't too tough. It took a couple of tries, but nothing I couldn't handle. And then the next one was Incest Castle. It was easier than Belurat. It's basically this game's version of Liurnia since it's magic centered and a lot of the same enemies return, but Rilana, despite sounding similar and having a name similar to Renala, it's not Renala. It's her sister, I'm pretty sure. But the main thing is that she'll run through you if you're not careful. She dual wields and has spinning and long combos, delays her attacks, and has an AoE that can one-shot you that I would never be able to dodge properly. But of course, when you use her AoE attack, it's useless because of its poor range. But for Rilana herself, I'm not really too sure how I feel about it. She delayed a lot of her attacks, and whenever I would successfully dodge her attacks, I didn't have much time to punish her because she quickly recovered and then we were back to square one, which meant dodging her attacks over again and again and again. This happens a lot with a lot of different Elden Ring bosses, particularly Margit/Morgott. You dodge his attacks and then you hit him, or not, and then he backs up and you're back to square one. He's definitely the worst when it comes to hitting you when you heal because of his daggers. Heal and he already has his dagger out. But back to Rilana, she has a pretty cool moveset. Beat her and you could get her armor and swords. Her armor is okay, I mean they're pretty cool, but her swords, however, like I said before, are my personal favorite. You know, light great swords, a new category of weapon added to the DLC, and like most of the weapons of the DLC, you can dual wield them. Mesmer, however, I almost don't want to talk about it, let alone say his name, like in Harry Potter where they're too scared to say Voldemort, but instead of avoiding his name because of fear, it's because of how trash he is. But he does look cool, and he has a pretty cool moveset, but he always seems to either two-shot or one-shot me since I'm on Journey 3, and also, since I'm on Journey 3, there's no coming back later when you're a higher level. Not like it would have made much anyway, since you already need to beat Morgan or Dog to even access the DLC, which is around level 60 or so. I'm level 304, so it's not like it'll make much of a difference if I come back later. Sure, you can use summons and spirit ashes, but since this is my first playthrough of the DLC, I usually try to avoid using them unless I feel like there's absolutely no way I'll beat the boss. This was one of those bosses. He's a terrible boss. Most of his attacks one-shot me, I dodged one attack and then he hits me with the follow-up. His combos one-shot you because you get caught in a stagger lock, and if you dodge them, you'll more than likely still get hit because of how long they are. And he'll even switch up his attacks on you, throw new stuff at you that you've never seen, and it'll be your 20th time going through it. I don't even know which phase is worse, his first or his second phase. I think they're both equally terrible, and his snake attacks are particularly terrible because I was never able to dodge them no matter what I did, particularly this attack. You get staggered if you're too close, which will probably be the case more often than not since he'll do it when you're attacking him, and then by then it's already too late and you're already dead. And if you're far enough back to be able to actually dodge them, the timing just seems so random. And then if you get hit by one, you'll get hit by all of them, and then you're dead again. And since I was in Journey 3, his grab attack is worse than Melania's, because at least you can actually survive Melania's if you have enough HP. Here, they inflict fire damage on you before he even impales you, and then he does it again after, so you won't even survive it. Mesmer, for me, was terrible, and it's just hard for the sake of being hard. Melania, she was doable. Mesmer, from what I played through so far, this was miserable. He was so aggressive and he hits hard, you barely punish him because when you do dodge his moves, you can only hit him 2 or 3 times before he's back at it again, hitting you, and then you're dead. And not even to mention, he delays his attacks. It's so dumb because delaying the attacks feels so unnatural, it feels like cheap artificial difficulty. There's no reason to have an enemy delay the attacks. I don't even want to imagine how this fight goes in Journey 8. This is only Journey 3. Journey 2 was a cakewalk, Journey 3 is more or so basically the same, and then you go to the DLC, and then it's just a huge spike in difficulty. I had to use my Mimic tier because too many times during this boss fight, I died before I could even hit him, and it happened 5 different times, and even with my mimic, it still took a long time. I've beaten this game twice, and have beaten Radon and Moog 3 different times, and I've never been so stumped at a boss like this. What were they thinking? Oh gosh, I've become those people that complain about the difficulty in Souls games. I've never been this mad at a boss before. Not in Sekiro, Lies of P, Lords of the Fallen, Bloodborne, even in the base game, excluding Estelle and Malekith. And speaking of the base game, I went back there to test the weapon out, and I flinched at the first enemy that hit me and started panic rolling away because I'm so used to them hitting me and taking half my health in like 3 hits. So you could manage my relief when I realized that they did barely any damage to me. But back to Mesmer, I'll tell you how I beat him. I farmed and I farmed and farmed and put all of that into HP. So my health went from level 54 to level 61, and then his attacks actually became survivable, and then I was actually able to beat him, but that still took a while. So now, let me tell you some top secret exclusive information. After beating the boss, Miyazaki himself had heard what I've done and how I beat the boss, and traveled all the way to my house to delete my 260 hours save file, but I wasn't gonna stand for it, especially not after everything I just went through. So in turn, I threatened to expose his deepest, darkest secrets to the world for not even being able to beat Soldier of Godric. And in that brief moment of hesitation, he was about to ask how I knew about that, but it was already too late. I had hit him with the waterfowl dance, and then he left crying in shame. But the threat of me exposing him and the fear of me hitting him with the waterfowl dance again was just too much for him to handle, so he exposed himself. Meanwhile, I got lost in the ruins of Rao. So, Shadow of the Erdtree is fun, but seems a bit unbalanced. Some enemies go down in 2 hits and don't do a lot of damage, while others, they're tanks and can one-shot you. I know I used the word tank a lot during this video, but it's true. And not even to mention the frame drops and performance issues that happen during boss fights and while exploring the open world. Optimization has never been FromSoft's strongest point, but at least the music is pretty good, particularly Belurat's music. But I don't want to say my experience with the DLC sours the Elden Ring experience because, like I said, I'm on Journey 3, so of course it's gonna be harder, but it just feels like they went too far in some places. Nowhere have I died this much in the base game on Journey 3, not even in Mountaintops of the Giants. I'll definitely have a look at this again on a new game save file at some point though, because I just feel like I owe it to Miyazaki after forcing him to expose himself.